What's up, everyone? I'm Phil. I'm back here with Martster, and we are creating a follow-up video. We did our Sapphire Nitro RX 7900 XT unboxing video the other day, and today we are going to play around with some overclocking and see if we can reach RTX 4070 levels of performance with an overbuilt cooler on the 7900 XT. So welcome back, Martster. It's great to have you. He's been lectured about speaking loudly. Yes, there's the card in the case. I'll do a little explainer about the setup as well in a minute. But Martster has been lectured about speaking loudly into the microphone, so everyone should be able to hear him.
Hopefully.
But perfect. So we've got the RX 7900 XT Sapphire Nitro Plus Edition, which does have a vapor chamber cooler. This version, as you showed, has 3 8-pin cables, so capable of driving some extra power. The current setup is a Leon Lee 011 Mini Air Edition. I don't have any extra fans in the case. We're using the stock intake fans, and I'm actually using my Scythe Mugen ARGB cooler as exhaust because it matches up right with the end of the case. So that's what we're running with. So not a ton of extra cooling in the case. Maybe that'll come into play, but that's something that I think people would have liked to know. So yeah, I'm gonna exit out of everything on the desktop except for 3D Mark and AMD's overclocking software, which we plan to use this. Actually, shout out to, there's a YouTuber that I have come to follow for AMD overclocking videos. The name is Ancient Gameplays. So shout out to Ancient Gameplays for helping me learn how to overclock an AMD graphics card. We're going to be following sort of his methodology here today and see what kind of performance levels we can extract out of this card. So before we start, I think we should look up what kind of scores RTX 4080s are getting. Let me see if I can find that. 3D Mark RTX 4080 results, and we'll be comparing. I'm running an R7 5800X CPU, so nothing ultra high end there. 32 gigs of 3600 megahertz CL16 RAM, so fast, but I have not overclocked it beyond the XMP settings. And yeah, so nothing crazy on the rest of the system, but we will be looking at the graphics score of the 7900 XT. So 3dmark.com search. Let's pull this up here. Let's search for GPU 4080, and we are going to be using TimeSpy Extreme. So best 3D Mark TimeSpy Extreme benchmark scores with NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4080. We have overall score of 15,627 and a graphics score of 15,754. So that's using a 13900K. It doesn't say anything specifically about the RTX 4080. It's very possible that all the top ones are liquid cooled, right? We won't really know that. So I think it may be helpful for us to kind of get a feel for what the bottom scores are for oh, here we go. We have an average score of 12,382 for an RTX 4080. So I've done a few runs with my graphics card on this, and it comes in around 10,000, it looks like, but that's without a well-tweaked overclock. So yeah, so I think to set the stage, our goal is to try and hit this average RTX 4080 score. So 12,382 is our goal. Of course, we won't know for sure that that's stable in games, but that's not really what we're trying to do here. We could always back off a little bit, right, to be more stable in games. But yeah, let's jump in. Martster, 12,382 is our goal. All right?
All right.
Let's do it. I'm going to pull up GPU-Z as well so that we can monitor what the GPU is doing. We're going to do this like Jay's 2 cents, except with hopefully a little bit more AMD overclocking knowledge from watching some videos and giving it a try. So, okay, let's jump right. Well, let's start off by running a stock benchmark. All right, we'll run TimeSpy Extreme 4K gaming with DirectX 12, and let's see. Do we want to do a custom run and run it in windowed mode? I don't think so. Yeah, let's just do a standard run and see where it goes and take a look at kind of what the thermals are on the GPU while it's running. So from what I know, it runs 2 GPU benchmarks and a CPU benchmark. I don't really know how to stop it from running the CPU benchmark, so we're just going to go with that for now. But until it loads up on this monitor, GPU is just sitting basically idle right now. 6% utilization, 100 total board power, and junction temperature, which is our hotspot, is at 56C. So we're loading up TimeSpy Extreme here, and then we should see it jump up. Excuse me. All right, there we go. I'm seeing FPS of 70 to 73 on this scene. Total board power right up to 348 watts, which is a fair bit higher than stock 7900 XT. In fact, I'm going to check that TDP on my phone so I can give that here. Let's see. Come on, tech power up. Where's the power? The card is still really quiet. Fans are running at 1200 RPM only. Still can't really hear it.
Wow. Yeah, I can't hear anything.
Over the AC, at least. So, some quick other stats. Utilization goes up to 100. Clock speed settles around 2400 megahertz max is what I've seen. Right now it's at 2233, and junction temperature up to 73C. So fans are still low because junction temperature just isn't very high. It's a super nice card. All right, we'll just go straight to AMD's website because Tech Power Up, I guess, didn't list the total board power here. So, all right. Okay, perfect. So AMD has this listed as typical board power of 315 watts. So we're at 350 about. So about 35 watts above a reference edition. Another interesting fact here, just out of the box, right? The boost frequency for the 7900 XT reference edition is 2400 megahertz, and the game frequency, or the game clock, is 2000 megahertz. So we're seeing about 300 megahertz higher there.
We have a question in the chat on what CPU we're using.
Yeah, we are running a Ryzen 7 5800X right now. So we're not going for any all-around computer records today. We're mainly going to be looking at the graphics score. We are benchmarking at 4K, so I'm anticipating that it won't be a big bottleneck. We're seeing GPU utilization go to 100 consistently in the benchmark. So hopefully that means we're not bottlenecking the GPU in any way at 4K. I'm going to take a look at the custom settings after this run to see if we can just drop the CPU.
Great question, Woozy. If there's any other questions, we'll try to answer them as well.
Yes, thank you. The CPU benchmark is pretty interesting because it keeps track of how many frames, you have to render the same amount of frames, and it keeps track of the time. And that's how it gives you a CPU score. Just interesting. almost done here. Okay, so this will give us our first run. Anytime now. There we go. Loading result. Okay, so the overall score was 10,440. And it looks like the graphics score was 12,409. So when I was looking at, looks like we're closer than I thought. When I was looking at the actual listed scores for the RTX 3080, it was telling me that my score was 10,440. So I thought that was telling me my graphics score, but it looks like we're surprisingly close to the average graphics score for RTX 4080s. In fact, let's double check that. So 3dmark.com search for GPU 4080. Let's make sure that we are looking at average graphics score.
Average score at the top.
3dmark times by extreme. Yeah, see, I think these are average total scores, right? You see my best score, 10,611. I'm pretty sure that that's talking about the times by extreme overall score rather than just the graphics score. So we need to be 100% sure what we are testing here. So this is average overall score is 12,000. So I don't know. Let's take a look here. So looks like most 4080s. Can we sort this by graphics score? Looks like no. What other? Score. Graphics score. Here we go. Perfect. All right. So the highest score for an RTX 4080 is 16,383 on the graphics side. The average score is 14,020, which going back to ours, we got 12,409. So about 2,000 points off. My best score is 12,967. So that was not our existing run. Like I said, I've done a little bit of experimental overclocking here, but this is where we're really going to try to dial it in. Cool. So yeah, new goal, 14,000 points, basically. That's going to get us the average score for an RTX 4080. That 2,000 point delta is likely due to, probably, is my guess, liquid cooling.
Okay. Can you pull up the chat in the other video?
Sure. Do you have some bots we got to ban or something?
No, there's 2 questions in there that I just can't read it from over there.
Oh, gotcha. Let's see here. Hopefully the chat is here. All right, perfect. Should I get an i7 13700H with an RTX 4070 Ti or an RX 7900 XT with a Ryzen 7 7700? Ooh, tough question. Tough question. I can only give my opinion, right? But I think the 7900 XT is a better performer than the 4070 Ti, personally. And, in fact, there's probably some 3dmark runs we can check right now, right? This is a synthetic benchmark, so it's a little bit different in real world. And, oh, you need to change the video resolution. It's not supported for this configuration. Why not, YouTube? I guess we'll just ask the chat. How does the video look, chat? Maybe YouTube is just trying to stop us from doing stuff.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not partners, so I thought we could run a stream in 4K if it looks really bad. Okay, video looks crisp. So I guess YouTube is just trying to tell me that we are peons without actually enforcing it. So
thanks, Woozy.
Yes, appreciate the feedback. So I think we're just going to keep going here, and we're trying to put some good content out there. Maybe YouTube should just let us stream at 4K. Okay, so I do have to turn this off here, though, because it will interfere with the benchmark scores. So we're going to drop this here. Balan, let's take a look at the 4070 Ti scores real fast and give you just a really rough really rough kind of estimate. So the graphics score for the RTX 4070 Ti on TimeSpy Extreme is on average 10,904. The 7900 XT, this 7900 XT, which, you know, runs a fair bit faster, I would say, out of the box than a reference edition, is scoring in the 12,000 point range. So my personal opinion so far, right, I should probably get more information about this. My personal opinion so far about the 4070 Ti is that it is a more efficient 3090 Ti that is memory bottlenecked in certain situations. So I don't love the card. I actually like the 7900 XT a lot more, even though all the big reviewers are totally panning this card as well, right? It's not great value, but I do think that I would choose this over 4070 Ti, personally. And there's only one caveat to that, and that's if you really, really, really want to play ray trace games. If that's your goal, you should probably look at the NVIDIA lineup. But yeah, going forward, I think we'll probably answer questions more related to the overclock rather than general PC questions. But let's jump in. Here we go. Okay. So our new goal is 14,000. Okay? We've got that dialed in. So we scored at 12,409. If we can raise our score by 1,600, we're achieving average RTX 4080 scores in TimeSpy Extreme. So what we're going to do now is we are going to actually run a stress test where it will loop TimeSpy Extreme, and we're going to start playing with the settings and you know, keeping an eye on whether frame rates are dropping, keeping an eye on power draw, memory speeds, GPU clock speeds, right? GPU load, we're probably going to do some undervolting here, right? This is something that the YouTuber I had mentioned earlier, Ancient Gameplays, recommends that you do. And a lot of, you know, forum posters on Reddit say you cannot overclock an AMD GPU without undervolting. So we're going to do that. And we're going to enable window mode for this so that I can tweak settings while we are doing stuff here. So, all right, let's start the stress test, and then we're going to go here. Oh, if you could show this would be helpful. So to actually overclock an AMD GPU using the AMD hardware, you want to go to the Performance tab in Radeon Settings, go to Tuning, and you'll see something here similar to this, where you've got System Tuning, CPU. You'll only see CPU if you have an AMD CPU. So I'm going to close that, and I'm going to open up the GPU here, the RX 7900 XT. There's some automatic tuning. We're just going to skip that, right? I think a lot of reviewers have sort of shown that will either overshoot and it doesn't do much, or it doesn't do enough. So we are going to go over to the right here to manual tuning and click custom. And accept the license agreement. Now we have some open options here, and when you begin overclocking AMD GPUs, you want to just enable all of these advanced control or manual. You know, I'm not going to enable advanced control of the fan curve. I'm going to leave it at stock for now. Maybe we'll play with, do we get a better score with, you know, setting the fans to 90% or 100%. And then power tuning. We definitely want to enable more board power. So here's one of the things I really like about this card. Right now you can see we're looping the benchmark over here. We're currently running at 348 watts, clock speed of 2469. So looks like the clock speed's a little bit higher on this first half of the benchmark. And voltage of 859. The voltage is very interesting. We'll talk about that later. So VRAM clock speed is at 2485. Ancient Gameplays also mentions that there's like a 14 megahertz offset on the GPU clock speed on his 7900 XTX for some reason. So don't know exactly what that means or why we should care about it. But you know, we'll factor that in if we want the clock speed to actually run at 2500 megahertz. You know, exactly, we need to set it to 2514, and we'll experiment with that. So first thing we're going to do, we're running about 71 frames. We're going to bump up the board power and hit apply. So I immediately noticed a change. We're up in the 89s, 87 to 91 FPS here. And check this out. 400 watts right away. So that's cool. And another thing I find awesome is you bump up the power limit, immediately you see a clock speed boost, 2598 megahertz. So this is about 200 megahertz faster without us even doing anything. So that's great. Actually, you can hear the fans ramping up now.
Yeah,
right?
I can hear him now.
And that's because our junction temperature has climbed over 78. The default fan curve starts ramping up around 70 degrees. So that's good. That's going to keep the car cooler, the card cooler. And why don't we just bump it up anyways? Let's disable 0 RPM and bump the fan up to, say, yeah. Cool. So fans are running at 2,900 RPM, almost 3,000. But that's keeping our junction temperature even at 400 watts at 71 degrees, which is awesome. Awesome, awesome. You know, feel bad for Martster. You may not know about this, but there was a faulty batch of the highest tier cards, 7900 XTX. Users are experiencing 110 degree temperatures at junction, and the card's downclocking and throttling.
Wow.
So we're lucky we didn't buy one of those, right? And we can have this overclocking stream today. Okay, so we've unlocked the power limit. I think what we're going to try to do next, right, rather than try to optimize power versus performance, we're going for, you know, maximum performance. So we are going to, rather than mess with the frequencies, first, we're actually going to mess with the voltage. So my theory is that if I drop the voltage down slightly, the card is going to run cooler and therefore have more clock speed headroom. And it might actually just do that on its own, right? By default, the max frequency is set to 2,735, and we're not hitting that. We're hitting 2,635. So let's give it a try. Let's see if we stay stable. If we drop voltage by 10 millivolts, 1090. Also, referencing back to the Ancient Gameplays video, the voltage slider on the AMD settings is more of a baseline reduction, is how you should view it. So when I drop this to 1090, the card's not going to run at 1090, but it's going to attempt to run 10 millivolts lower. Because you can see, it's running at 962 instead of 1100, right? Even though it's technically set to 1100. So we're going to drop it by 1090. We'll keep an eye on the board power and the clock speed. So at 2655, apply. Let's see. The voltage did drop by a little bit, it looks like. Board power stayed the same. Clock speed stayed about the same. Didn't really notice a big change here, I guess. And we're still running. So at some point, right, I'm going to keep going down. At some point, this is going to crash because it cannot sustain the speeds at the voltage that I'm setting it to. So let's try 1080. And we're going to apply. Looks like we're still running. Total board power maybe dropped a little bit, right? We're seeing 390 watts now with about the same performance. I'm going to just bump the max frequency to 2800 here just in case that's holding it back in some way. I do think 27. What's funny about this is I think I'm remembering the numbers, but there's so many numbers that I don't actually know what it was running at before. So, okay, so 1080 works. Still stable. 1070. Still stable. We are over 2700 megahertz here. Now, I have seen some reports of these cards running at 3.2 gigahertz, so 3200 megahertz clock speed. But that was the XTX version. Notice something very interesting. Our temperatures have actually decreased quite a bit just from this undervolt, which is kind of awesome.
It's almost nice.
Exactly. Almost nice. Let's try 10 more millivolts. I feel like we've got to be approaching crashing territory. Look at this. Immediate junction temperature decrease to 68. That's very cool. Fans are still high, but I've bumped the fan curve. You can see it here. I've raised it up just to... Let's keep this thing cool. See how well it can run. We are seeing some slightly higher speeds. 2724, I think, might be one of the highest speeds we've seen for clock speed so far. I know if we want to force it up, we're going to have to bump up the minimum frequency. So, I don't know. Let's keep going down this voltage pathway and see if it can keep looping at 1050. I've completely forgot about GPU-Z, which tells us the historical GPU clock. So 1050 is still running. So let's come over to here. There's no way to zoom into this, I believe. Let me see. Yeah, no way to zoom in. Screenshot, refresh, settings. Can I make it bigger? Looks like no. So I'll just talk through it. So if I mouse over, I can actually see the speeds. You can see here, early on in our runs, we were running at 2368. Right? If we mouse over to later on, we're running at 2722. That's a lot faster, which is awesome. This is turning out to be way more fun than I thought it would be. So, great. So we can see the speed increasing, right? 24, 2456, 2400, and then here we start to see our first 2500, 2600, and then we see I see a 2735 in there. Right now we're at 2725, which is high. And I haven't even touched frequency sliders, right? So that's one of the important things here. We're on loop number 9 out of 20. So let's drop it 10 more millivolts. This has got to be the one that crashes. Come on, there's no way the card can undervolt this much. Maybe this would be stable in games or something. We're at 2739. The clock speed just keeps creeping up as we undervolt. Junction temperature down to 67. GPU temp 55. This is great. 10 out of 10. Nitro, you're killing it so far. All right. Just because we haven't crashed yet, let's try another 10 millivolts down. Jeez, still didn't crash. That's crazy. 2746, I think, is our new high number. Let's check over here. Yeah. Yeah, 2746, 2752 actually at one point. This is crazy.
Wow.
This is dope. We should do this with your 3060 Ti one day. Okay, 1020. Are we going to crash? No. Board power is sitting at 381. This is the real reason I feel that it was worth buying the Nitro Plus, is that it can run at such a high power. Because if you buy the reference edition, you can overclock it, but it's not going to hit 400 watts. And to get the same performance, right, the 7900 XTX does have a TDP of 350 out of the box, and it can go up to 400 or higher. So I think having this big overbuilt cooler, right, the third 8-pin connector for the power supply is just really good.
What's up, Flex? You're not late to the party. We haven't even crashed yet.
We haven't even crashed the first time. 1010. I still can't believe this is running. 2762. With a junction temperature of 65. Wow. How have we not crashed? I mean, we're approaching a point where I feel like it just hasn't crashed in 3D Mark, right? And it would crash in some game under some specific load, right? So more stability testing is needed. But, I mean, that's a 90 millivolt undervolt so far. Starting to be pretty substantial. It's only running at junction temperature of 65. Just nutty to me. I could lower the fan curve and it would still be cool. Total board power of 369 watts. So that to me suggests that we can maybe bump up the minimum frequency and boost back up some of that power. But we haven't even touched video RAM yet. So let's keep going. How about a 100 millivolt undervolt? Here it is. Moment of truth. Oh, didn't work. Still running. Wow. Sapphire is impressing me tremendously right now. So just to remind everybody, we started off this run at, you can see here in the past, 23 2370, 2345. Those are the types of clock speed we were seeing. Once we started looping and undervolting, after we unlocked the power limit, we were up at 2541. And as we kept on going, we have now reached 2773 with just undervolting. So giving it, maxing out the power limit slider so it can use up to 400 watts and then undervolting. So far we're at 100 millivolts undervolt. 990, 3 digits. Are you ready? Martster, click for me. Still running. This is crazy. One thing to call out here is when we first started, right? So let's bring it back to 1100, and we'll immediately watch this clock speed drop. Look at this. Back down to 2650, 100 megahertz down. The voltage, the actual voltage reading, jumps up to 965. When we lower the baseline by 110 millivolts, you'll notice something really interesting. This number actually goes down quite a bit. And the clock speed immediately jumps up, which is really cool. So 990, still stable somehow. 980. Still running. Martster, would you believe me if I legitimately thought we would maximum be able to lower it 5 times? That was my rough guess, that a 50 millivolt reduction was going to be it. That was going to be the maximum we could lower it before it crashed. So I'm absolutely blown away right now. Maybe I got really lucky. I don't know. Every card's different, right? They call it the silicon lottery. If you have a card that can undervolt and overclock a bunch, then you're lucky. That one was manufactured really well compared to, the next one. So 970. .970 is still running. And we've now reached a new record clock speed of 2783 is the highest I've seen so far.
2778.
There's your 83.
90?
90. 2790. Remember, we haven't actually touched minimum frequency. We're not trying to force it up. The card is doing this on its own so far, which is freaking awesome. Interestingly, total board power it's fluctuating, right? We see it in the 350s. We see it up to the I've seen 390 even. Junction temperature down to 62, but running at 2780 megahertz. Now, this is something that's genuinely cool about overclocking AMD GPUs, right? It's running faster, but it's also running cooler. So I'm simultaneously gaining performance and extending the life of my GPU. That's something that I find to be fascinating, something I've always wanted to do with an AMD card. The only reason I waited until now is because I was waiting for an AV1 encoder. So now that they put that in here, I'm on Team Red, and I'm really liking it so far. Okay, 960. This would be 140 millivolt reduction in voltage. This has got to be a crash. Still running. I saw 2789 on the frequency. Or 2794. That's crazy. This card is absolutely killing it right now. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop. We've undervolted. We've gained a bunch of clock speed. We're going to stop the stress test, and we're going to run just another benchmark and see how we score.
Sounds good.
One thing I noted earlier is that the first benchmark runs at a higher clock speed, and the second one was about 200 megahertz lower, so maybe it's a different type of load. It could be that we don't pass the second one at this undervolt. So let's see what happens. Okay. So benchmarks, 2160p. We've got TimeSpy Extreme. Custom run. Can I stop the CPU test? Yes, there we go. Disable async compute. Let's try custom run. I don't know if this. The problem is I don't know if the standard run has the same, texture filtering, tessellation factor, right? I hope that these are set to stock. So honestly, we're just going to run a normal one. Or maybe I disabled the CPU test. We'll see. If it doesn't run the CPU test, then that'll be perfect. Let's see if we stay stable. And I'm really interested on the second graphics test to see how fast the clock speed runs and whether it's stable. So we'll see. Some extra context, right? One of the very interesting things that Jay's 2 cents discovered in an overclocking live stream of the reference edition and the Power Color Red Devil edition, which is, heavily overbuilt, kind of a whole new level cooler, is that as clock speeds increased, memory speed would actually go down. Like the card was giving the memory less power and running it and downclocking the memory to keep stability, right? To send more power to the actual GPU die. We'll see if we see any of that kind of behavior, right? We'll know if we're having that behavior because the scores will go down instead of up. So we'll see. But here we are. We've been running this on loop for a long time, so I don't expect it to crash here. We'll see if it crashes on the second one. We are in the 80s for FPS, though. This is significantly improved over our previous run. So this is going to be exciting. We're definitely going up. I haven't run enough 3D Mark to even estimate or guess how much more up we went, but hopefully it was a lot. And hopefully it would be 1600. So then we can just say, okay, we've reached RTX 4080 levels. Let's jump. Let's see if we can, hit the max RTX 4080 level. Okay, here we go. Graphics test number 2. This is the moment of truth. Also, something I failed to mention earlier, I do have AMD Smart Access Memory enabled. So I enabled that in the BIOS. You can see the AMD settings reports that is enabled. Let's see what this clock speed goes to here. 2789, 2709. So definitely a little bit lower than the previous one, but still high. And no crashes. You've been quiet over there, Martster. What are your initial thoughts?
A lot of big words.
Beautiful.
But overall, impressed with the ability of the card. It hasn't crashed. The cooling ability.
The gains.
The gains and.
I mean, I just saw this go over 100 FPS briefly. That's triple digits.
Yeah. Temperature still
very low. Fans are pretty high, right? You can definitely hear them, but
yeah,
maybe they're audible on the microphone. Honestly, we're not using any kind of, noise suppression, so they could be audible in the microphone to the viewers. So board power draw right now is 386 watts. All right, looks like it's still going to run the CPU test, so we'll just let it do it. For the sake of testing, since I don't know what the default settings are, I'm not going to do a custom run and try to disable the CPU test just in case they don't have the default settings enabled on all custom runs. Perhaps somebody will come in and show me the light, show me the way, and let me know exactly what the settings are by default. But I recognize that this does waste us about a minute every time we run it, so we won't do that many runs. We'll go back to looping after this and experiment with further undervolts. Some VRAM tuning, perhaps. We haven't even touched the memory speeds yet, which will also give it more bandwidth, right? Get us to another level.
Woozy says he's going to overclock his card along with us.
Beautiful. Are you currently running a 7900 XT as well, Woozy? I believe somebody commented on the unboxing video and noted that they were waiting for their power supply to come in, and they had the same card. So that'd be cool. I'd love to compare results. Here we go. Test result loading. What do you think? What's your guess, Martster? I think we're going to be at 13,200.
Wow.
13,600. We're only 400 points off the goal. This is beautiful. This is absolutely beautiful. All right, let's get back to stress testing here. So windowed mode, run stress test. Okay, so we are at 960 millivolts. I did bump the max frequency up to 2800 because I didn't want to stop the card from going up. We are getting close to 2800 megahertz, though. I might have to bump that up further. We'll see. We'll see what happens. So I think we probably want to undervolt it as much as we can. I think we probably want to undervolt it as much as we can. So we want to find our crashing point for undervolt, and then back off of that by 10 millivolts, and then overclock the VRAM.
Delex says, that was me. I just got my power supply in the other day. I only done the auto undervolt as I don't really know what I'm doing yet.
All right. That's beautiful. Out of curiosity, what was the auto undervolt value that the software put in for you? Just out of curiosity. All right, so we are running now. We're back to our normal speeds here of 2788, 2791 I've seen here. Let's try 950 millivolts, which that's 150 millivolts down from the baseline, which I'm still a little bit just flabbergasted by the level of undervolt that this has handled without crashing. And it looks like it's going to handle 950 without crashing.
Delex says 1075 microvolts.
Okay. Millivolts, I think is the actual thing. Okay, so
175,
1075. So we are down to 950, which is absolutely nutty. Look at this. 2803. We've exceeded the max frequency slider. Holy cow. Okay, I'm just going to bump the max frequency up to 3000 just in case Homeboy wants to go up to 3000. Why not? Oh, 2920. 2936. Holy moly. I am not a profane man, but that is a high number. Wow. Okay, fine. You know, the card probably won't boost itself to death. Max frequency does not force it to go up, but I'm going to give it up to 3.2 gigahertz. Why not? 2935. What is our high number? Let's reference GPU-Z here. 2956. 2980. Okay, now we are definitely running at 400 watts. Actually, I should probably clarify. I actually think that my max frequency was keeping the card from running at 400 watts. Remember, when I undervolted, we were running in that 350 watt range, and between 350 and as soon as I uncapped the max frequency all the way up to 3.2 gigahertz or 3200 megahertz, we're back up to 400 watts total board power, which is the maximum. So junction temperature back up to the 70s. This is really, really fast. And actually voltage went back up, even though our baseline voltage is still down by 150. We're back over 900 millivolts actual voltage. Okay, let's try 940. 3010 megahertz. Holy moly. What in the world? It's just sitting in the 2900s now. This is incredible. Maybe I should have expected this, but I didn't know I needed to expect this. So I really am truly blown away. It didn't crash at 940. 930. Here we go. Oh. There it is. Wow. Okay.
First crash of the night.
First crash of the night. Took a little bit longer than expected, but watching that card stretch its wings was a beautiful thing. An issue report has been created. Let's see. Are you going to bring it back for me, NVIDIA or AMD? Or do I need to restart? Looks like my main monitor is just... Nope, we're back. We're back. What was the number? 930?
Can't remember.
I mean the voltage number. I think
voltage.
it was 930 millivolts is the one we just had, which we just crashed on. So let's see if I can get back into it and see if the drivers are working properly or not, and we can just keep going, or if I need to do a restart. When I read the Tech Power Up article about the 7900 XTX Tough Edition overclocking to 3.2 gigahertz, I was like, wow, that's crazy. There's no way I'm going to get anywhere close to that. We are close to that. Let's be clear. We are close to that number, which is really, really impressive. All right, so 3D Mark says it's running, so let's see if I can kill it in process. Yeah.
Delek said the auto overclock is 2909 megahertz.
Okay. 2909 megahertz being the max number or the minimum number. Because AMD allows you to set a range, right? Here's the minimum, here's the maximum. So you can use that to optimize like efficiency. So if I undervolt and then I set the maximum a little bit lower, it'll kind of just sit at the maximum, or drop between the maximum and the minimum. But I'm interested in which of the two numbers it was set. Was it the maximum number or was it the minimum number? And that's pretty aggressive, actually, right? If it sets the maximum to 2909, well, I guess it was 2700 by default on the Nitro card. So I guess it's adding a 200 megahertz increase.
Like says he would love to get the Nitro Plus, but he can't fit it in his case. And he had the reference instead.
Okay.
Couldn't fit in the case.
Yeah, the Nitro is a chunky boy. Do you wanna show it one more time here? It is a chunk. Like, this is a Leon Leo 11 Air Mini. There's probably only an inch and a half between the edge of the card and the front case fans.
Yeah.
It do be a thick boy.
Our recommendation, though, would have been to get a new case.
All right, let's try to fire up Radeon settings, GPU Z, and 3D Mark. So we're going to go back to looping at 940 millivolts and see if we stay stable. Here's our sensors.
Like says true.
There's an interesting bug with the Radeon settings, for me at least, where the first time I launch it, where my cursor is not actually where I'm able to click, and then I have to relaunch it, and then it fixes itself. It's very interesting. So, okay, performance, tuning. Let's close off system. We've got all this stuff open here. All right, yeah, so voltage is set to 1100 millivolts by default. I don't actually know if that number is relevant or not, right? But every time you back it off, you're reducing the baseline voltage. So, and that's according to Ancient Gameplays on YouTube. Definitely check him out. I think he's one of the best AMD overclocking, AMD graphics card overclocking streams, YouTubers out there. So let's back off to 940 volts. Let's bump up our power limit by 15%, and let's hit apply. Let's go back to stress testing using TimeSpy Extreme in windowed mode. So as long as we run stable here for a little bit, I think we'll move to our next goal, which is to attempt to bump the minimum frequency and see what level of stability we encounter there. Maybe that's a fruitless exercise, right? Because it'll run automatically at its highest frequency.
Delek says it doesn't say whether it's a minimum or a maximum.
Okay.
Interesting.
My guess is the max frequency slider has been moved up to 2909 or whatever that number was. I don't remember off the top of my head, but that's my guess. The minimum frequency just by default just sits at 500, and I don't think it's doing too much. I don't think it's very heavily used, is what I'm trying to say. All right, so we're back to 940 on voltage, 940 millivolts, and power limit is up 15%. Oh, actually, check this out. I would like everybody to see this. So we've got our power limit maxed out, power limit slider maxed out. We've got our voltage down to 940. Clock speeds are currently running at 2797, okay? Total board power is only 342. This is an example of the max frequency slider actually limiting us. So keep an eye on this total board power. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put max frequency. Uh-oh, I think we just crashed. No! Well, every big YouTube overclocker will tell you that it's normal to not be able to hit the previous number anymore. So we're gonna restart again, and we'll back it off one more to 950.
Good night, Flux.
All right, it's unfortunate. I mean, I knew the voltage was too good to be true. I knew. But let's see. Maybe. So we crashed at 930. We backed it off to 940. We crashed again. We're going to back it off to 950. Maybe the 950 will be a point of better stability. We can always back it off further to 960. So we'll see. Radeon, GPU Z, and all right, here's this guy. There's that bug again. Gotta relaunch it. It's very weird. Maybe I should file a bug report and tell them about that. Okay. Discord's fine. Yeah. All right, last but not least, 3D Mark. Here we go. Again.
Because our audio is popping, it says. Maybe it's just him?
No. I know what it is.
We're on it.
It's literally, it's got to be these cables touching the, it's got to be static on the mic. Darn it. That's great feedback. Whoever gave it, thank you. Okay, so that's, our mic cable is not touching any power cables anymore. I'm hoping that resolves the problem.
Let us know if the audio increases or quality increases.
Keep us in the loop if it stays bad, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, Time Spy Extreme on windowed mode. We'll let that start, and then we're going to reapply our overclock. Hopefully we get to something that we can, a profile we can save here soon.
It's better now? Nice, thank you.
Beautiful. We love to see it. We're streaming direct to YouTube, so it's not like we can edit anything in post-production at this point.
We'll get there, though.
One day. Oh!
Oh, that's like a major crash.
Yeah. Blue screen. Page fault in non-paged area. Huh. Okay.
It's a big boy crash.
I am getting a little nervous that we crashed the GPU drivers. Because in terms of risk to the GPU, right? if you overvolt instead of undervolt, so you give it more power to run with, that's when you run the risk of like actually frying the card. Since we're undervolting, we're progressively lowering the power usage of the card. And so, you know, overclocking can give you that sickening feeling like, did I just destroy my card? But we are undervolting in this case. I'm relatively confident that we'll be able to resume our tests. Let's see here.
If not, then
if we crash again at stock settings, I think we'll probably need to, like, I'd probably have to go and reinstall the drivers and, you know, kind of mess around with the machine, and we could probably pick it up another night. But
and if that is the case, we'll update the description to "Two idiots break super expensive card."
That would be truly sad. Okay, so we're back. We're back. Let's see if the test will run or not. I mean, the card is, temperatures are low, clock speeds look normal, everything nominal, or whatever astronauts say. Let's see if it runs.
Rip indeed, Woozy. Should also probably point out that we're building, you know, the studio space right now. So try to focus on the stud in front of you rather than the ones behind you.
Okay, got the bug with the clicking on Radeon. All right, I think we're in business. We're running. The benchmark is running. And the card is running at the normal power, normal voltage, everything's normal. Clock speed's in the 2400s. So, remind me, Martster, we were backing off the voltage. I hadn't even tried 950 yet, right? So we did 930, crash. 940, crash. We tried again at stock, crash. Now we're back. 950 is our number, I believe.
I think you're right.
Fascinating. Once I hit the undervolt, the clock speed jumps up so fast that the fans immediately ramp up because it crosses the threshold of temperature. Very interesting. So, this is what I wanted to highlight before we crashed last time.
Okay.
I've undervolted. Oh, I need to increase the power limit. Let's do that. So we immediately see this clock speed at 2805, but it'll throttle itself back down because the max frequency is currently set to 2795. This keeps the board power low. Once we uncap the max frequency, the card will use the remaining 50 watts of power available to it, look at that, immediately, 400 watts, to boost to higher clock speeds. So because we're not at 940 millivolts or 930, I don't know if we're going to see over 3000. But we are seeing a nice 29-24 right now. So
Woozy says Nitro doesn't break that easily. He was able to run a bench 3200 microhertz. Megahertz. 1000 millivolts.
Okay. Nice.
I'm a layman, everyone. Sorry.
Hey,
don't know the abbreviations.
Everybody learns. Everybody learns sometime. So that's interesting, right? 1000 millivolts is a more conservative undervolt, which in theory should mean you can hit higher clock speeds. There's more power, right? So what I'm going to do next, right? We are running at 400 watts right now at about 2930 megahertz. I'm going to bump up the minimum frequency to 2950 and see if we crash. See if we are hitting a limit here or not, or if the card can increase its minimum a little bit, right? So I'm trying to force it up a little higher here. Looks like it's fine. Oh. That's a rip in the chat. That's a nitro rip. Unfortunate. Okay, so it looks like it doesn't like higher clock speeds than what it automatically boosts to. So the actual art of overclocking, where you manually set a higher speed, is not. It doesn't really feel like it's a thing with this card, because if you give it more power and lower the voltage so it can direct that power into the clock speed, it will. It automatically will boost up, as long as I don't cap it. So that's important. Let's restart. I think we should move to VRAM overclocking now and see if we can get any performance out of that, because the RAM can likely run faster without any extra power. And I think if we can optimize the VRAM, now that we've sort of hit what appears to be a ceiling on clock speed and voltage, I think we can break our 14,000. And,
cool.
And then I can save that profile and we can start testing it in games and see if it actually crashes.
Do you want to do that tonight or another stream? What's your thought?
Let's I think the VRAM, because we're maxing out the power, I think we have barely any headroom. So I think it's going to be a short endeavor, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Discord auto launching is not something I want. GPU Z is something I want. Let's get Radeon back up here. Since we have to launch it twice, we will launch it twice. Okay. 3D Mark. I gotta say, I'm still really impressed with the undervolting performance and how it, it's possible we may have actually reached that same level of performance by bumping up the frequency instead of lowering the voltage. Perhaps the card would have lowered its voltage to achieve that frequency. I don't know, but we've gone the way we've gone. Times by extreme. Let's see if we can run.
Delex says, I wonder what the Nitro Plus XTX could do.
That's a great question. My number one question about the XTX is what's the power limit? Because the coolers are, from what I can tell, the coolers are identical, right? Sapphire Vapor X. This uses a vapor chamber. The cooler and the power delivery subsystem, I believe, are extremely similar, if not identical. So I'm really interested if the XTX version is actually able to use more power, because I'm not convinced it can. But somebody will have to correct me on that. The XTX is going to be faster, right? More cores, more RAM, more VRAM, and more VRAM means more VRAM chips, which means wider bus, which means more bandwidth, right? So the XTX will definitely perform better, but you can't really say this was a value buy because this was more expensive than a reference XTX edition. But it was certainly a very interesting problem to try to solve in my view.
So far, we're super impressed with this card.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least I am. As a layman, I'm impressed.
Okay, so we're back to our previous settings. 950 millivolts. Power limit slider maxed out. 0 RPM fan disabled. Just want to make sure the fans stay running. And then the max frequency has been bumped from 2700 to 3200, just to make sure the card goes as high as it can. Right, so that's where we are. With memory frequency, let's move on to VRAM here. We're running at 2485. To be honest, I have not messed with this at all. I don't know what these cards are capable of generally, and I also don't know if we're going to get a lot of performance out of this because we are locked at 400 watts of total board power. So in theory, we're sharing now, right? 400 watts is going to the die, and 400 watts is whatever's not going to the die is going to the VRAM. So if we bump this up, maybe the clock speed actually goes down, or the VRAM speed goes down, like Jay's 2 cents has seen, or something like that. I don't know. We'll see. Let's try bumping this up to, let's see, 25 let's try 2514, right? You see the VRAM is running at 2485. We're going to do that 15 megahertz, 14, 15 megahertz offset that Ancient Gameplays is talking about. And see if we can get this to just run at a clean 2500. And we'll also use GPU-Z to tell whether our clock speed has gone down. Okay, there we go. So clock speed was up in the 2960s, and looks like it hasn't really been affected. 2955. Maybe it is a bit lower? I don't know. Hard to tell. But no crash after bumping it by 14 megahertz. So let's try a little bit more. To get it to run at 2515, we probably would need 2530. So there's another 15 megahertz. And accepted. Board's still running at 400 watts. Let's try another 15 here. Looks like it only accepts even numbers. I think I actually put the same number in. 2530. Apply. Okay, there we go. Up to 2517. I'm still seeing good clock speeds here. Over 2900. Spikes up to 2950-ish. So far, I think we've improved performance. Frames are still high, right? So Jay's 2 cents in this case, even with the Power Color Red Devil XTX version, would see significant frame drops at this point. So down into the 30s or 40s. So I think we're still good. So let's do 2346, 2546. Hit apply. Every time I hit apply on the VRAM, both monitors flicker, and it makes me greatly concerned, but we're still going. 45 plus 15 is 60. So let's try 2560. Changes. Looks like it's accepting all of these overclocks pretty easily, which is great. 2576. Here's another 15. Hit apply. Clock speed immediately goes up. Frames are high. Looks good so far. Clock speeds still look good. Okay. 75 plus 15 is 90. Apply. There we go. It looks like it did take it. It took it a little bit to get that last 7 megahertz, but frames are still high. Clock speeds are still high. Board power is still at 400. Let's keep going. 90 plus 15 is 2506. Ooh. Oh. I actually lowered it. 2606. That's it. Notice how far it is. It took it a bit. It stayed at 2550-ish, and then it finally jumped up to 2592. We're still high on the clock speed. This is also looking good, honestly. 2505 plus 20, or plus 15 is 2620. Let's jump up another 15 megahertz. Hit apply. And bumped up. So one thing I don't know anything about on this card is whether the vapor chamber is also cooling memory or not, right? I'm assuming it is. So memory temperatures are a factor in how well the memory overclocks us, most likely. Let's see, do we see that? Memory controller load. No, don't have any memory temperature data here. But we're still running fast, so 2620. Let's add another 15 megahertz. Took that without a problem. 35 plus 15 is 50. Oh. supply, bumped up to that without an issue. Clock speeds are still in the 2920 plus range, which is high. This is awesome.
Balin has a question. Should I get an RX 7900 XT with a Ryzen 770 or a console? Short answer, not the console.
I'm a PC hardware nerd. You know, in my view, if you can afford... Oh, wow, we're running Spotify in the background here. In my view, if you can afford to run a higher-end PC, that is probably the most immersive experience that you can have. So I am definitely in favor of PC over console where possible. Just jumped another 15 megahertz, and the clock speeds they've done it. Wow. Oh, interesting. Board power dropped to 393 watts there for a sec, but you know, checking all our relevant metrics, temperatures look fine. Junction temperature of 72 running at this super high clock speed. This is 550 megahertz higher than what it runs by default, which is substantial. At a much lower voltage. And clock speed, VRAM clock speeds are up to 2662. So I'm bumping it by 15 megahertz increments. We're trying to look for that crash, right? Or we're trying to look for a substantial drop in either frame rates, VRAM speeds, or clock speeds. So 75 plus 15 is 90. Here we go for 2690. And we're there, 2676. No crash yet. So 2706 is our next value. That should take us to 2692. I do see the clock speed here actually dropping a little bit. 2908 is not really a number that I have been seeing for a while, and it's kind of stuck there. You notice that. So what I'm wondering now is, are we borrowing clock speed from the GPU to funnel more power into the memory? That's what it maybe feels like a little bit. Without doing another run, it's hard to say. Let's try to get this to run at 2700 megahertz even, and then we'll do another run. And I think we might reach 4080 levels, right? We might reach 4080 average. So 27. By the way, the max frequency for memory is 3000. Just as an aside here. Apply changes. Would you mind asking our mutual friend Jeff to calm down? When your gamer friends just don't want to let you have fun overclocking your hardware. Okay, so 2700 megahertz VRAM, 2922 clock speed. I did see that drop to 2900, but we're going to try this. Okay, this is, I think, we don't really have enough time to truly optimize everything, I think, tonight, but let's see if we can hit 14,000 with these numbers. How do we feel about that?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay, back to the benchmark. Time spy extreme stress test. Okay, we're running this guy. Run. Let's do it. This one's for all the marbles.
Probable last test.
Probable last test, exactly. You can do it, Nitro. Part of me is a little bit disappointed we can't go over 400 watts. A small part of me, right? For some context, right? The 4090, the RTX 4090 has a default TDP of 450 watts. So it's a power-hungry monster. The 7900 XTX reference edition is 355 watts. So these overbuilt coolers that look a lot more like 4090s, they can push 400 plus watts. So, you know, if the Nitro 7900 XTX can go over 400 watts, I think it's going to be a monster. But I kind of wish we could go over 400 on this one.
Jeff mentioned in the chat, I'm calm, Jeff says.
Yes, let's all stay calm. Frames look good, but maybe not higher? I don't know. Different parts of the test have kind of different average frame rates. So we'll just have to see what happens. We are running in the 2800s for clock speed right now, which is a little bit lower. I feel like we are borrowing clock speed from the GPU die so that the memory can run at 2700 megahertz because we're power limited. That's my guess. Unfortunately, if this was an NVIDIA GPU, GPU-Z would tell us what the performance limiter reason is. So it would say it's power and not clock speed or voltage or something like that. It would say we don't have enough power to do this. Because we are limited to 400 watts, it seems, I have a feeling that we're borrowing, like we're sharing between VRAM and clock speed right now. Because these clock speed numbers are down a little bit. But that could also be the voltage that we had to step back up 2 steps, right? So, I don't know, for sure. We'll have to see how the score comes out.
To quote Howard Stark, we are limited by the technology of our time.
Thank you. Thank you. That's what we needed, right there. Martster is the hero we needed, not the hero we deserved.
Hey, that's a Marvel and a DC universe in the same video.
Looks like it's going to be stable through the second run as well, which is great. Honestly, I'm stoked about this. The junction temperature of the card through this run, for context, is 67 degrees Celsius. To quickly contrast that with reference 7900 XTX coolers that are broken, that are running at 110C and thermal throttling because of a design flaw in the vapor chamber cooler. This is a lot cooler. A lot cooler. Okay, we're going to run the CPU test last, and this one will be for all the marbles, my friends. 14,000 graphics score. That's what we need. And part of me is just a little bit sad that I think if we don't hit 14,000, it feels like the power limit is the reason and not actually the chip. Like the chip could run faster, the VRAM could run faster, but it may just be power limited. Also, I wanted to point out to anybody watching the video or the live stream that there is a tuning preset called Rage Mode that is probably a little bit better than clicking, undervolt GPU or overclock GPU, because it boosts the power limit, and that is the one thing that I've done that's had the biggest impact, probably. Between that and voltage, it's hard to tell. Here's the moment of truth. Loading result. Come on, give me that 14K. 14,598. Let's go. Holy moly. Okay. Martster, before we shut this thing down, we're gonna prove that we did this. 3D Mark. Let's Google the. I should have bookmarked this. But you know what? Can't win them all. 3D Mark results. 3dmark.com search. Here's our 4080, which, remember, the XTX is marketed as a 4080 competitor. And it does beat it in most rasterized benchmarks, not in ray tracing, however. But my goal with this overclocking live stream was to determine whether the 7900 XT could rival the 4080 in performance. Obviously, we need to go beyond synthetic benchmarks, but this is a step. So graphics score on the 4080 in 3D Mark TimeSpy Extreme. Graphics score. Okay, so here it is. On the left here, we are looking at RTX 4080 graphics scores. On average, 14,020 points. Okay? Here, over here, we have our best score with our Sapphire Nitro RX 7900 XT edition, 14,598. We did it. We've done it, lads.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Let's recap the actual settings that I used, because anybody else with a similar card may want to compare, right? So right now, voltage is set to 950 millivolts. Remember, this is a lowering of baseline voltage according to Ancient Gameplays, who is a YouTuber that you should definitely check out if you're interested in overclocking your AMD GPU. The power limit slider is maxed out, which for the Nitro Plus gives us 15% more power and allows us to use up to 400 watts. I've turned off 0 RPM and I've bumped up the fan curve to keep things cool. Smart access memory is enabled, and the max frequency slider for the GPU is set to 3200 megahertz. If you leave it at 2700 megahertz, you're likely going to actually cap the... You'll notice your card using less power because with the undervolt and a capped max frequency, it will just need less power. So I have max frequency set to 3200 megahertz. And lastly, and based on the fact that we got 1,000 more points, I'm going to say not least at all, I have the VRAM frequency set to 2714, which lets the clock speed run at an even 2700 megahertz. We did not reach a crashing point here yet. So there may be some headroom left over still, but we're running at 2700 megahertz on the VRAM. So with that profile, just going through it quickly one more time. Max frequency, 3200 megahertz. Don't touch minimum frequency. Voltage at 950 millivolts. VRAM at 2714 to actually run at 2700. And then power slider set to max. That is what landed us a 14,598, which is honestly awesome. That's a solid 2,000 points higher than where we started. So,
Woozy has a question. He said he's asking, "Are you running Time Spy?"
Yes, we are running Time Spy Extreme. I do have a 4K gaming monitor here, so we are running Time Spy Extreme, not Time Spy. So that's DirectX 12 test for 4K gaming. So just to be clear, we are also comparing 4080 Time Spy Extreme scores, graphics scores only.
Cool.
So,
any other questions in the chat before we?
Yeah, we're about to shut it down. Thank you so much for joining us, those of you who did. I'd love to make more hardware videos. Hardware is one of my passions. Making videos is something that I don't have a lot of time for, but would love to make more time for. So thank you for watching. Thank you for watching live if you were here live. Thank you for watching the recording later. Let me know what else you'd like to see with this card specifically, right? This is kind of the one thing that I've got that I think that I can provide some beneficial information for the community about. So, but I definitely love to get more involved in benchmarking, overclocking, right? One day maybe benchmarking games, we'd have to see. But obviously also super grateful for Martster for basically being the reason that we have this content today. Without you, it wouldn't have worked, because I would have had to keep turning the camera manually, and I'm deeply appreciative, Martster.
Layman, overclocker, and amateur videographer at your service.
That's us right there. But yeah, let's shut it down. Thanks, everyone.
Woozy says GG's.
GG's. Absolutely. We did it. We reached 4080 average levels.